Two millionaire brothers were refusing to eat, wasting away in silence as the world watched on without answers. Until a poor young girl broke into the mansion, not out of malice, but with 2 cookies she had rescued from the trash and an immense amount of courage. With a simple gesture, she brought back laughter, hunger, and life to the boys who were forgotten in their own home. If this beautiful story of resilience and love has captured your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know which city you're watching from. Now to continue, the great wrought iron gates rose like silent guardians before the Anderson mansion in the most exclusive gated community in Westchester County, New York. Behind those walls of travertine marble and bulletproof glass breathed a family the entire United States knew from tabloids and social media. Richard Anderson, at 52, had built a technology empire that stretched across the country. His name was stamped on mirrored skyscrapers, on multi-million-dollar contracts, and on the business pages of newspapers. But on that late March afternoon, as his driver chauffeured him back from another business trip to Washington, D.C., Richard had no idea he would find his life completely transformed. The house exuded luxury from every corner. Czech crystal chandeliers hung like captured stars from the 20-foot-high ceilings. Persian rugs protected Italian marble floors that reflected the golden light of the New York sunset. Each room looked as if it had been lifted from an international design magazine, with furniture signed by European designers and works of art that cost more than entire apartments on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It was a perfect setting for a perfect life, at least that's what the cameras showed to the nearly 2 million followers, who followed every detail of the family's routine. Vivian Anderson, 41, had become one of the most followed digital influencers in the country. Her videos on modern motherhood, luxury lifestyle, and wellness tips amassed millions of views. With always impeccable blonde hair and skin that defied age, thanks to the best cosmetic treatments in New York, she personified the consumer dream of thousands of American women. Her routine was religiously documented: organic breakfasts, Pilates sessions, shopping trips, dinners at exclusive restaurants. Every moment seemed carefully calculated to convey a sense of absolute happiness and personal fulfillment. But behind the cameras, for the last 15 days, something had drastically changed in that house. The twins, Arthur and Philip, just 6 years old, had stopped eating. It began gradually, with subtle refusals during meals. An "I'm not hungry here," an "I don't want that" there. Vivian initially interpreted it as a common childhood tantrum, something that could be resolved with firmness and a few strategic punishments. After all, children needed discipline, and she had always prided herself on keeping the boys on a strict routine. Arthur, the more extroverted of the two, used to be a cheerful and communicative child. His brown eyes would sparkle when he talked about the cartoons he watched, or when he showed off a new toy. Philip, on the other hand, was more introspective, but equally affectionate. He liked picture books and spent hours building towers with colorful wooden blocks. The two were inseparable, complementing each other like two halves of the same heart. But now, sitting at the dining table in chairs that looked like Lilliputian thrones, they just pushed the food from one side of their French porcelain plates to the other. Their little faces, once chubby and rosy, were beginning to show a worrisome pallor. Their cheeks, which Vivian always proudly displayed in her videos, seemed to have lost their characteristic childhood vivacity. Their eyes, once bright, now carried a sadness that no expensive toy could disguise. Vivian's first reaction was denial. During her live stream, she continued to show colorful dishes and talk about the importance of a balanced diet. "Boys, come show Auntie how well you eat," she would say to the camera, trying to lure her sons into the frame. But Arthur and Philip remained distant, even refusing to appear in the videos, something completely unheard of in their young lives. That had always been shared with the digital world. As the days passed, the situation worsened. The food remained untouched on their plates. It didn't matter if it was the colorful donuts they loved so much, the fruits cut into fun shapes, or even the artisanal ice creams that cost a fortune at the gourmet grocery store in the neighborhood. Nothing sparked the boys' interest. They limited themselves to small sips of water and occasionally some natural juices, but refused any solid food. Vivian began to feel the pressure from the comments on her social media. Attentive followers noticed the children's absence in the videos and questioned their well-being. "Where are the boys? Why don't they appear anymore? Is everything okay with the family?" The questions multiplied, and she found herself forced to create creative excuses. "The boys are going through a more reserved phase," she would explain with a forced smile. "They prefer to play in their rooms now." The truth was that Arthur and Philip barely had the energy to play. They spent most of their time lying in their race car beds, staring at the ceiling decorated with glow-in-the-dark fluorescent stars. When they tried to get up, their little legs would tremble slightly, and a constant fatigue kept them in a lethargic state. It was as if an invisible shadow had settled over them, draining all the joy and vitality that characterized childhood. The first medical consultation happened on the 8th day. Dr. Henry Castlewhite, a renowned pediatrician who served New York's elite, examined the boys with the experience of someone who had seen it all in his 30-year career. He measured, weighed, listened, and asked questions. The blood tests revealed nothing abnormal. Glucose levels were controlled. There were no signs of infection or serious nutritional deficiency yet. The doctor frowned, intrigued. "This is unusual behavior," he admitted, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the results. "From a clinical standpoint, there's nothing to justify this refusal to eat. It could be a phase, an emotional trauma, perhaps some event that has shaken them." He looked directly at Vivian, who was clutching her Hermes bag as if it were a shield. "Has there been any significant change in their routine? Any event that might have caused stress?" Vivian shook her head energetically. "Doctor, my children have the most structured lives in the world. Perfect sleep routine, organic food. The best educational toys, English lessons, swimming, music. They are privileged children. This behavior makes no sense." Dr. Castlewhite suggested a consultation with a child psychologist, but Vivian refused immediately. "My children are not crazy, doctor. They're just going through a phase. It will pass." The idea that there could be something psychologically wrong with the children was unacceptable to her. How would she explain to her followers that the perfect children of the perfect family needed therapy? The second doctor, a pediatrician specializing in childhood eating disorders, reached the same conclusion. The physical exams revealed no organic pathologies. Dr. Sandra Miller, a 50-year-old woman with a kind but determined gaze, tried to talk directly with Arthur and Philip. She sat on the floor of the playroom, trying to establish eye contact and a natural conversation. "What do you like to do most?" she asked in a soft voice. Arthur just shrugged, avoiding her gaze. Philip hid behind his brother, as if the doctor's presence represented some threat. There was no aggression or tantrum, just a deep sadness that seemed to have settled in their little hearts. "And food? What did you like to eat most before?" the doctor insisted. "I'm not hungry," Arthur murmured, his voice almost a whisper. "Me neither," echoed Philip, resting his head on his brother's shoulder. Dr. Miller observed the interaction between mother and sons during the consultation. She noticed that Vivian was constantly on her phone, answering messages and organizing appointments. When she addressed the boys, her voice carried a tone of impatience, disguised as affection. "Arthur, sit up straight for the doctor. Philip, stop hiding, that's rude." The words sounded affectionate, but the subtext revealed anxiety and irritation. "Mrs. Anderson," the doctor said at the end of the consultation, "I'd like to have a private word with you." In her office, away from the boys, Dr. Miller was direct. "The children are showing signs of emotional distress. The refusal to eat may be a way of communicating something they cannot express verbally. It's crucial that we investigate the family environment, the dynamics of the house, possible stressors." Vivian became irritated. "Doctor, with all due respect, but my husband and I provide the very best for our children. They have a life that millions of children would love to have. There is no emotional distress in this house. Sometimes, Mrs. Anderson, what we adults interpret as the very best may not correspond to the real emotional needs of children. They need to feel seen, heard and loved unconditionally." "Of course they're loved," Vivian exploded. "I document it every day on my social media. They are the most loved children in America." The doctor sighed. She had dealt with similar cases before, families where the appearance of happiness overshadowed real happiness, where the emotional needs of the children took a back seat to the need to maintain a flawless public image. The third specialist was a child nutritionist, Dr. Paul Henry, who arrived at the Anderson house with a briefcase full of imported supplements and special formulas. "We're going to try to stimulate their appetite with advanced nutritional resources," he explained, preparing colorful mixtures that promised to awaken the children's interest in food. Arthur and Philip watched the colorful liquids with a mixture of curiosity and apathy. They tasted a few drops, but soon pushed the cups away. The artificial taste of the supplements seemed even more distant from what they really needed. Vivian began to document these moments for her social media, but strategically. She posted photos of the colorful supplements with captions like, "Taking care of my prince's health with the most advanced in the world. When you truly love, you spare no effort." The comments came in by the thousands, praising her maternal dedication and offering support. But the reality was very different from the narrative constructed for the digital world. At night, when the cameras were off and the social media spotlights were turned down, Vivian would lock herself in the master suite's bathroom and cry. Not out of genuine concern for her children, but out of desperation that the situation was slipping out of her control. How could she, who had built an entire career on the image of a perfect mother, explain to the world that she couldn't get her own children to eat? The fourth consultation was with a renowned homeopath, Dr. Robert Silverman, who promised results through natural remedies and flower essences. "Children are energetic beings," he explained, examining Arthur and Philip with a magnifying glass and detailed questionnaires. "Sometimes, emotional blockages manifest in the physical body. We will work with specific flower essences for each temperament." The boys received drops that tasted like water, with a slight sweet touch. For a few days, there seemed to be a subtle improvement. They drank some juices and even tasted small pieces of fruit. Vivian celebrated on social media, as if it were an epic victory. "Nature always has the answers. My babies are getting back to normal thanks to natural care," she posted, accompanied by emojis of green leaves and hearts. But the improvement was temporary. In less than a week, Arthur and Philip returned to their previous state, refusing any solid food. This time, however, they seemed even more fragile. Their skin took on a pale tone that not even the most sophisticated filter could completely disguise in the photos Vivian insisted on posting. The fifth doctor was a child psychiatrist, Dr. Leonard Aguilar, a specialist in emotional disorders in early childhood. Vivian only agreed to the consultation after Dr. Castlewhite practically demanded it, warning that the situation could become a medical emergency if not resolved soon. Dr. Aguilar spent 2 hours talking with Arthur and Philip, using playful techniques and drawing therapies. The boys drew loose figures, shapeless scribbles, always in dark tones. When asked about their family, they drew a large empty house with closed windows and no human figures. "What do you feel in here?" the doctor asked, gently pointing to the boys' chests. Arthur looked at Philip as if asking for permission to speak. Finally, he whispered, "It's empty." "Empty how?" Dr. Aguilar insisted. "Like there's no one here," Philip added, his voice barely audible. The consultation extended for another hour, but the boys limited themselves to monosyllabic answers. They showed no anger, rebellion, or aggression. It was as if they had given up on something fundamental, as if an essential hope had been extinguished in their little hearts. On the 14th day, Richard Anderson finally returned from a business trip that had kept him away for nearly 3 weeks. Between meetings in Washington, D.C., New York, and Chicago, he had completely lost track of the severity of the situation. Vivian always gave him optimistic reports over the phone. "The boys are fine, love. Just a bit under the weather, but it's already passing. You focus on work and I'll take care of everything here." When he crossed the threshold that Friday afternoon, Richard expected to find his sons running to greet him, as always happened when he returned from a trip. Arthur and Philip used to compete to see who would reach him first, for a hug, shouting "Daddy's home" down the mansion's hallways. But the house was silent, a heavy, strange silence that immediately caught his attention. Vivian appeared on the marble staircase, descending the steps with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was perfectly dressed, as always, but there was something different in her expression. "Love, you're here," she said, kissing him quickly on the cheek. "How was the trip? Did you close the deal with the government?" Richard hugged his wife, but his eyes were searching for his sons. "Where are Arthur and Philip?" They didn't come to greet. "Me?" "Oh, they're playing in their room. You know how it is, they're in a more independent phase. Growing up so fast," Vivian replied, trying to sound natural. Something in her tone didn't sound right. Richard had known his wife for almost 10 years, since she was just a budding influencer with a few thousand followers. He knew how to recognize when she was hiding something. "I'm going up to see them," he said, heading for the stairs. "Wait, love." Vivian held him by the arm. "Let me tell them first. They've gotten very shy lately, I don't know why." Richard stopped and looked directly into his wife's eyes. "Vivian, what's going on? You're acting strange." "Nothing, dear. It's just that, well, they've been through a bit of a difficult period with their eating. But it's all under control now. Several doctors said it's normal, a phase for their age." "Difficult how?" Richard's voice took on a seriousness that Vivian knew well. "They've been a bit off their food, you know how it is. Kids can be picky sometimes, but we're treating it with the best specialists in New York. All expensive, all private, you don't even need to worry." Richard took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring his wife's protests. His heart raced with a mixture of anxiety and foreboding. Reaching the hallway of the children's rooms, he heard a silence that chilled him to the bone. Where was the laughter, the sounds of toys, the excited voices that always filled that floor of the house? He pushed open the door to the twins' room and felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Arthur and Philip were lying in their beds, as still as little porcelain dolls forgotten in a dusty attic. Their little faces, which Richard remembered as rosy and chubby, now had a pallor that broke his heart. Their cheeks had lost the roundness characteristic of childhood, and their brown eyes seemed larger in faces that had become more angular. It was as if someone had sucked all the vitality out of those small beings. "Arthur? Philip?" Richard's voice came out choked, laden with an emotion he couldn't control. The boys turned their little faces toward their father's voice, and a faint smile briefly lit up their expressions. "Daddy!" they murmured almost in unison, but without their usual explosive energy. It was as if even the joy of seeing him had been filtered through a layer of deep exhaustion. Richard knelt between the 2 beds, extending his arms to hug his sons. When he touched them, he felt they seemed lighter, more fragile, like wounded little birds in need of special care. "My boys, what happened to you? Daddy missed you." "We missed you too, Daddy," whispered Arthur, snuggling into his father's chest. "You went away and were gone for a long time." Philip moved closer on the other side, completing the hug. "We called for you at night, but you didn't hear." "Us?" Richard's heart constricted. He had spent the last few months immersed in business, closing multi-million-dollar deals, expanding the company to other states. He thought he was building a better future for his family, but perhaps he had lost the most important present, being there present in his children's lives. "You're so thin," he observed, trying to keep his tone light so as not to scare them. "Haven't you been eating?" Arthur and Philip exchanged a look that revealed a silent communication, as only twins can. It was as if they shared a secret they didn't know how to express in words. "We're not hungry," Philip said quietly. "The food doesn't taste good," Arthur added. "But you always loved to eat. I remember you fighting to see who finished their plate first," Richard insisted, feeling a lump form in his throat. "That was before," Arthur murmured. "Before what, my love?" The boys looked at each other again, but remained silent. It was as if there was something they wanted to say, but couldn't find the words to express. At that moment, Vivian appeared at the bedroom door with an expression that mixed irritation and concern. "Love, you're scaring." "So them? The doctors said we can't put pressure on them. It's a delicate phase." Richard stood up slowly, feeling anger rise in his chest. "Vivian, they're malnourished. What do you mean a delicate phase? How long has this been going on?" "I already explained. It's only been 2 weeks. And they're not malnourished, they're just a little thinner. You're exaggerating because you've been away for too long." 2 weeks? Richard raised his voice but immediately controlled himself so as not to frighten the boys. 2 weeks without eating properly, and you didn't think you needed to tell me?" "I did." "Tell you? I said they were a bit under the weather. You told me to handle it, that you were busy with the government contract." Richard closed his eyes, trying to remember their phone conversations over the past weeks. It was true that Vivian had mentioned something about the boys being a bit under the weather, but she always downplayed domestic problems when he was traveling for business. He had interpreted it as a common cold, something routine in any child's life. "Leave the room with them," he said quietly but firmly. "I need to talk to you." In his office, away from the boys, Richard sank into an Italian leather armchair, feeling the weight of a guilt that was beginning to form. Vivian remained standing, crossing her arms in a defensive posture. "Richard, you're being dramatic. Children go through phases. All the doctors confirmed there's nothing serious." "Nothing serious? They're wasting away. How can you call this nothing serious?" "They're being monitored by the best professionals in New York. Dr. Henry Castlewhite, Dr. Robert Silverman, Dr. Sandra Miller. Very expensive people of the highest caliber. If it was something really serious, they would have detected it by now." Richard ran his hands over his face, feeling the exhaustion of nearly a month of travel mix with the anguish of his discovery. "And what did these doctors say? What's the diagnosis?" "There's no specific diagnosis. It could be emotional. It could be a phase. It could be a sophisticated childhood tantrum. Children sometimes do this to get attention." "Get attention? Vivian, look at them. They're wasting away. You're being dramatic. They drink liquids, take imported supplements. They're receiving all the necessary nutrients through special formulas." Richard stood up abruptly, feeling his irritation grow. "Nutrients through formulas? They're children, not ICU. Patients. They need to eat real food, play, smile, have energy." "I'm doing my best," Vivian exploded. "You travel for a whole month, leave me alone to take care of everything, and when you get back, you want to be the expert on motherhood? I'm the one who's here every day. I'm the one who took them to all the doctors. I'm the one who's taking care of them." Taking care of them? Richard faced her with an expression she had never seen before. "Are you taking care of them, or are you worried about keeping up appearances for your followers?" The question hit Vivian like a slap. "How dare you question my dedication to my children?" "Our children, Vivian. And I question it because in 15 years of our relationship, I've never seen you prioritize anything above your public image." The silence that followed was sharp. Tears of anger welled up in Vivian's eyes, but she controlled herself. Crying would ruin her makeup, and she had a live stream scheduled in 2 hours. "You're unfair," she finally said. "I love our children more than anything in this world. Everything I do is for them, to ensure they have the best of everything." Richard looked out the office window, observing the impeccably manicured garden with its trimmed grass and geometrically arranged flowers. It was beautiful, perfect, but there was something cold about the scene, as if life had been tamed to the point of losing its spontaneity. "Maybe," he said slowly, "they don't need the best of everything. Maybe they just need genuine attention, real presence, love without cameras." "Are you implying that I don't love our children?" Vivian's voice rose a few tones. "I'm implying that maybe your way of loving has become so performative that they can no longer feel that it's real." These words echoed through the office like a funeral bell. Vivian was silent for long seconds, processing the accusation. Part of her knew there was a painful truth in those words, but admitting it would mean dismantling the entire life she had built. "I need to work," she finally said, heading for the door. "I have professional commitments that cannot be cancelled. The boys are fine, Richard. You're making a mountain out of a molehill." After she left, Richard remained alone in the office, feeling the weight of a reality he was beginning to understand. He had built a financial empire, but perhaps he had lost his own family in the process, and Vivian, in her quest to build an image of a perfect mother, had perhaps forgotten how to be a real mother. That evening, Richard dined alone at the dining table that seated 12. Arthur and Philip accepted only a few sips of orange juice, gently refusing any solid food. Vivian was locked in the home office, recording content for her social media. "Hi, my loves. Today I'm going to talk about the importance of staying calm during the challenging moments of motherhood." Her voice could be heard from the other side of the door. "It's not all roses, but love always finds a way." Richard shook his head in disbelief. She was literally turning her children's suffering into content for her social media. After dinner, he went up to the boys' room and sat on the floor between the two beds. "Do you want to tell me what's really going on?" Arthur and Philip looked at each other again, as if consulting one another on the safety of sharing their feelings. "Daddy," Arthur finally said, "can you stay home more now?" "Why do you want me to stay home more?" "Because when you're not here, it's very empty," Philip explained. "Empty how, my love?" "Mommy is always with that thing in her hand," Arthur said, making the gesture of holding a cell phone. "And she talks to the people who live inside it, but she doesn't talk to us. And she always asks if we're okay, but she doesn't listen when we answer," Philip added. Richard felt his heart tighten. "And did you try to tell her you weren't feeling well?" "We tried," Arthur said, "but she always says it's nonsense, that we have the best of everything, that we can't be sad. So we stopped trying," Philip whispered. "And when did you stop eating?" "When the food started to have no taste," Arthur explained. "It's like it turned into cardboard." Richard hugged both his sons, feeling a mixture of pain and determination growing in his chest. "Listen carefully, my princes. Daddy is going to stay home more now, and we're going to figure out together how to make the food taste good again, okay?" "Promise?" they both asked at the same time. "I promise." That night, while the house slept, Richard stayed awake in his office, researching on the internet about childhood eating disorders, child psychology, emotional neglect. Every article he read made him understand the gravity of the situation better. It wasn't just about food. It was about affection, presence, genuine attention. He began to remember details he had ignored in recent months: how Arthur had stopped running to hug him when he arrived from a trip, how Philip no longer showed him his block constructions with the same enthusiasm, how the two always seemed to be waiting for something that never came. And then he understood something devastating. His children were starving emotionally. The New York night stretched silently outside, but inside the Anderson mansion, something had changed forever. Richard had awakened to a truth he could no longer ignore. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in the outer boroughs where the lights of the early morning were very different, an 8-year-old girl named Hope was taking care of her 2 younger siblings in a makeshift shack. She didn't know that soon her path would cross with that of the Anderson family, in a way that would change all their lives forever. Hope had learned from a very young age that caring means more than having food on the table or nice clothes in the closet. It meant being present when someone cries, giving comfort when someone is afraid, sharing even when you have little. It was a wisdom that no university taught, but that life on the streets had engraved in her little heart. The next morning, Richard cancelled all his meetings for the week. For the first time in years, his professional schedule took a back seat. There was something much more important to take care of: the soul of his family. "Have you gone mad?" Vivian questioned when she learned of the cancelled commitments. "You have meetings with international investors." "I have children starving emotionally," Richard replied, with a tranquility that contrasted with the gravity of his words. "You're being dramatic. They'll be fine." "No, Vivian, they won't be fine until we understand what's really happening here." It was at that moment that Richard made a decision that would change everything. He would dedicate himself full-time to his sons, observe them, truly listen to them, try to understand what their childish souls were trying to communicate through this silent refusal to eat. What he didn't imagine was that the answer would come from where he least expected it, through a child who knew real hunger, but who had learned that true love can transform even the simplest pieces of food into a banquet of hope. Richard's second day at home revealed new disturbing details. He observed how Vivian interacted with the boys, always with her phone in hand, always dividing her attention between them and her digital obligations. Every conversation was interrupted by notifications. Every moment of affection was documented for social media before it was genuinely experienced. "Arthur, come give Mommy a kiss for the video," she would say, positioning the phone. "No, not like that. Smile properly. Now hug me tight. Perfect." And after recording, she would simply walk away, leaving the boy with the smile still frozen on his face, not understanding if that affection was real or just a performance. Richard realized that his sons had learned to perform love, but they no longer knew how to feel true love. It was a devastating discovery that made him question everything he believed about his family. It was time for a radical change, and that change was closer than he imagined. On the other side of New York City, Where glass towers give way to cramped houses and wide avenues turn into narrow alleys, there exists a completely different universe. It is there, in Hope Village, a neighborhood in the Bronx, a name that carries more irony than real hope, that an 8-year-old girl lives who knows life in a way no child should. Hope Smith, a prophetic name given by a mother who believed that names had the power to change destinies, woke up that Friday before the sun even appeared on the horizon. There was no alarm clock in her small house, but her body had developed an internal clock that always woke her at the same time. It was 5:30 in the morning, and she had a routine to follow. The house where they lived was a 2-room construction made of unplastered blocks, with a tin roof that got as hot as an oven in the summer and as cold as ice in the winter. The first room served as everything at once: kitchen, living room, dining room, and study area. In the second, 3 single beds shared the space with a plywood wardrobe that she herself had painted, light blue with leftover paint from a neighbor's renovation. John, 5 years old, slept in the middle bed, his peaceful breathing breaking the silence of the early morning. Mary, just 3, occupied the smaller bed, hugging a rag doll that Hope had sewn from fabric scraps donated by the neighborhood church. Hope slept in the bed closest to the door, a strategic position that allowed her to protect her siblings from any danger that might arise during the night. Their mother, Constance Smith, had passed away 2 years ago, defeated by an illness that the doctors at the health clinic never quite managed to diagnose. A lung problem, the hurried doctor would say, prescribing medicines that cost more than a week's family income. Constance worked until the last day she could stand, washing clothes for families in the city center, carrying heavy bundles on the crowded bus back and forth day after day. In the last months of her life, when she could no longer work, she dedicated herself to teaching Hope everything she knew about taking care of a house and small children. "Listen well, my daughter," she would say in a hoarse voice. "Caring isn't just about giving food and clean clothes. Caring is hugging when they're scared, singing a song when they can't sleep, making up a story when they're sad. Affection doesn't cost money, but it's worth more than any expensive thing in the world." Hope learned these lessons as if they were prayers. After her mother was gone, she naturally took on the role of caregiver for her siblings, even though she was just a child herself. There was no discussion, no hesitation. It was what needed to be done, and she did it. The boy's father had never been around. In fact, they were children of different fathers, all men who had passed through Constance's life like shadows, leaving only a child and no commitment. But that was never a problem for Hope. John and Mary were her siblings by heart, and that was stronger than any blood tie. That Friday morning, Hope got up silently, put on the T-shirt that served as her school uniform, and went to the small yard behind the house. There, a public faucet provided water for the entire alley, and it was necessary to get there early to avoid the lines that formed later. She filled an empty paint can that served as a bucket and returned home. She washed her face, brushed her teeth with a toothbrush that was already worn out but still did its job, and prepared breakfast. Breakfast was always the same. Bread she bought at Mr. Jackson's bakery, who sometimes gave her a discount when he saw she was taking care of her siblings alone, and milk that her neighbor Mrs. Rose shared with her when she received her social assistance food basket. "John, little Mary, time to wake up," she called in a soft voice, sitting on the edge of her siblings. Beds. John opened his brown eyes, still sleepy. "Is it time for school already, sis?" "Not yet, love. First we'll have breakfast, then I'll walk you there." Mary stretched, opening a toothless smile that lit up her entire round face. "I'm hungry, Hopey." Hope smiled at the affectionate nickname. "Come here, princess. Let's wash that little face and brush those little teeth." The morning routine was a sacred ritual. Hope had understood, without ever having read about it, that children need routine to feel safe. So every day they followed the same sequence: wake up, wash face, brush teeth, breakfast, put on clean clothes, tidy the house, and only then the day's activities. Mary was still too young for school, so she stayed at home with Mrs. Rose, the 60-year-old neighbor who had become a sort of surrogate grandmother to the 3 children. John studied at PS 101, a public school 3 blocks away, a school that operated with limited resources but where the teachers worked miracles with dedication and creativity. After dropping John off at school, Hope would return home to take care of Mary and help Mrs. Rose with some household chores. In return, the neighbor took care of Mary, while Hope also had to go to school in the afternoon. Hope was in the 2nd grade, but she read with the fluency of a much older child. Her teacher, Mrs. Claudia, always said she had a special gift for words. In fact, Hope had learned to read with her mother, who, despite little formal education, had a habit of reading everything she could find: old newspapers, advertising flyers, street signs, product labels. "Reading opens doors," Constance would say. "Even if we don't have the money to go through those doors now, one day we will, but only if you know how to read." At school, Hope was an exemplary student, but she was also known as the girl who always shared her lunch. When some children showed up without a snack, she would split hers in half, even if it meant having less food for herself. "An empty stomach doesn't let the mind think," she would explain, repeating a phrase her mother used to say. That Friday afternoon, while Richard Anderson was cancelling his multi-million-dollar meetings on the other side of the city to care for his children who refused food, Hope left school hungry. Her lunch had been shared with 3 classmates who came to class with nothing to eat, and her stomach was rumbling softly. Walking through the streets of Hope Village, she observed everything around her with the attentive eyes of someone who had learned early to look for opportunities in the most unlikely places. She passed by Mr. Jackson's bakery, who waved from the door. "Hey there, Hope. How are the little ones?" "They're all well, Mr. Jackson. John is learning to write his name by himself." "That's great, girl. You're raising that boy very well." Hope smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. Compliments like these made her feel she was on the right path, that she was honoring the trust her mother had placed in her. She continued walking and stopped in front of the street market that took place on Fridays in the neighborhood square. It was the end of the day and the vendors were starting to pack up their stalls. Hope knew this was the best time to find fruits and vegetables that couldn't be sold and might be donated to those in need. "Mrs. Carmen," she called, approaching the vegetable stall, "are you going to throw away those carrots?" Mrs. Carmen, a woman from the South who had migrated to New York more than 20 years ago, looked at the girl with affection. "Oh, my dear, these carrots are a bit wilted, but they'll still make a good soup. Take them, and take these potatoes too." "Thank you so much, Mrs. Carmen. God bless you." Hope put the vegetables in a cloth bag she always carried and continued her rounds. At Mr. Manuel's stall, she got some ripe bananas that would be perfect for making a smoothie for Mary. At Mrs. Antonia's stall, she was given some tomatoes that would make a nice sauce for the dinner pasta. This was how she supplemented the minimal income she received from the government's social program, with creativity, humility, and the generosity of people who understood her situation. Hope never asked directly. She would ask if things were going to be thrown away, if she could help carry something, if there was anything she could do in return. Her dignity was preserved, and people felt good about helping such a polite and hard-working child. When she got home, she found Mary playing in the yard with dolls made from corn cobs, while Mrs. Rose was sewing on the porch. John hadn't come back from school yet, as on Fridays he attended tutoring. "How was school today, dear?" Mrs. Rose asked, without looking up from her sewing. "It was good, Mrs. Rose. Mrs. Claudia said that next week we're going to start studying about animals." "How interesting. And did you bring any homework?" "I did. I need to write about the animal I like the most." "And which one is that?" "I think I'll write about the neighbor's cat, Whiskers. He's affectionate and takes care of his kittens with so much love." Mrs. Rose smiled, recognizing that Hope always found parallels between school lessons and real life. "That's a good choice, dear." Hope went inside and started preparing dinner. She washed the potatoes and carrots she had gotten at the market, put them on to cook with a bone that the neighborhood butcher always saved for her on Fridays. It would be a nutritious and tasty soup. As she cooked, she hummed a song her mother used to sing. It was a simple lullaby, but it always calmed Mary when she was upset or scared. "Sleep, my baby, Mommy is here. Sleep, my love, tomorrow we'll smile." At 6 in the evening, John arrived from school with an excited expression. "Sis, today I learned how to do addition." "That's great, John. Show me." The boy took a crumpled piece of paper and a blunt pencil and wrote neatly, 2 plus 3 = 5. Very good, love. You're getting so smart. John smiled, proud of himself. The teacher said that anyone who knows how to do math will never be cheated when they grow up. The teacher is right. That's why you have to study hard. During dinner, which took place at the small plastic table in the main room, Hope watched her siblings attentively. Mary ate her soup with appetite, getting messy and laughing when the vegetables slipped off her spoon. John talked about his schoolmates, the games at recess, the stories the teacher read during snack time. Hope felt a deep satisfaction seeing her siblings well-fed, healthy and happy. It was a simple but genuine happiness. There were no expensive toys, designer clothes or decorated rooms, but there was something much more important. There was real love. After dinner, Mary took a bath in a plastic basin in the yard, while John brushed his teeth and put on his pajamas. Hope read a story to them, making up adventures of a brave princess who took care of an enchanted kingdom where all the children were happy. And the princess knew that the real treasure wasn't made of gold or silver, she narrated in a soft voice, but of warm hugs and true smiles. And she had little siblings too, right, sis? John asked. Of course she did, and she loved them more than anything in the world. Just like you love us, Mary questioned, her eyes already heavy, with sleep. Just like I love you. After her siblings fell asleep, Hope sat on the porch of the house, looking at the stars that managed to shine even with the big city's pollution. It was her time for reflection, when she thought about her mother, the life they led, the dreams she had for the future. She dreamed of studying hard, getting a good job, giving John and Mary a better life. She wanted them to be able to go to a university, travel to beautiful places, see the world beyond Hope Village, but she would never stop teaching them that true wealth lies in the love one gives and receives. That night, as she prepared for bed, Hope had no idea that her life was about to intersect with that of a wealthy family that had lost its way to happiness. She didn't know that, the next day, a series of events would lead her to a mansion where 2 children desperately needed something. She knew how to give better than any adult. True affection. Saturday dawned hot and muggy. Hope woke up earlier than usual, with a strange feeling, as if something different was going to happen. She got up, did her morning routine and prepared breakfast. But when she went to the small pantry behind the refrigerator, she discovered that the bread was gone. How silly of me, she muttered to herself. I forgot to buy it yesterday. John and Mary were still asleep, so Hope put on the first clothes she found and headed for the bakery. But when she got there, she found it was closed. Mr. Jackson had traveled out of town to visit a sick relative. She walked to the bakery in the next neighborhood, but it was too far and she didn't want to leave her siblings alone for too long. It was then that she remembered that she sometimes found bread and pastries in the trash of the French bakery in downtown Manhattan, food that was still good but was discarded just because it had lost its perfect appearance for sale. It was a long walk, but Hope was used to it. She left a note for Mrs. Rose explaining where she had gone, grabbed a bag, and set off towards the city center. The walk took almost 2 hours. Hope walked along busy avenues, crossed bridges, passed through neighborhoods. That seemed like other worlds. And that's how, for the first time in her life, she arrived in the affluent neighborhood where the Anderson mansion was located. The houses were enormous, hidden behind high walls and imposing gates. The cars parked on the streets cost more than many families would earn in several lifetimes. It was a universe completely different from anything she knew. She found the French bakery on a tree-lined street, with elegant display windows and a delicious aroma wafting out the door. But when she got to the back, the garbage truck hadn't passed yet. There were several plastic bags with pastries and breads that looked perfectly edible. Hope carefully checked each item, separating only what was really good. She found 6 sweet rolls, 2 croissants, and some honey cookies. It was a treasure for a family that knew hunger up close. It was while she was organizing everything in the bag that she heard a soft cry coming from somewhere nearby. It was a child's cry, but it didn't sound like a cry of a tantrum or whining. It was a cry of deep sadness, the kind she knew well. Hope stopped what she was doing and listened. The sound was coming from behind a high wall, from a house that looked like a palace. Without a second thought, she followed the sound, moved by the instinct to care that she had developed from a very young age. That's how the adventure began, that would forever change the lives of two families who, until that moment, lived in completely opposite worlds. The soft cry that drew Hope in seemed to be coming from inside the mansion, but she could hear it clearly through a slightly open window on the ground floor. It wasn't a cry of physical pain. She knew how to tell the difference. It was a soul's cry, the kind she herself had cried in the first nights after her mother was gone. It was the sound of a broken heart trying to communicate. Hope walked around the high wall, looking for a way to see where the sound was coming from. The bag with the bread and cookies swung from her arm as she followed the sound like an emotional compass. There was something in that cry that touched a deep part of her being, the part that had learned to recognize when someone needed care. On the other side of the wall, Arthur and Philip were sitting on the floor of their room, hugging each other, letting silent tears escape. Richard had left for a quick meeting with the family lawyer, and Vivian was locked in her office recording content for her social media. The boys were alone, as they had felt for weeks, even in a house full of people. "My stomach is growling," Arthur murmured to his brother. "Mine too," Philip replied, "but I can't swallow anything." It was a cruel paradox. Their bodies were asking for food, but their souls rejected any nourishment that didn't come with true love. They couldn't explain it in words, but they felt that something essential was missing from every meal they were offered. Hope continued walking around the property until she found a small side door at the back of the mansion, probably used by the staff. The door was ajar, forgotten by someone who had left in a hurry. She hesitated for a moment. She knew that entering private property without permission was wrong, but the children's cries were like a call she couldn't ignore. "Mum," she whispered, looking up at the sky, "help me do the right thing." Carefully, she pushed the door open and went inside. She found herself in an impeccably manicured inner garden with plants she had never seen before. The lawn was so perfect it looked artificial, and the flowers were arranged with a precision that looked more like a painting than a real garden. It was beautiful, but there was something cold in that perfection. She followed the sound of the crying, which was now closer. She walked along the side of the house until she found a glass door that led to an inner hallway. The door was also open, and Hope could see expensive furniture and decor that looked like it had come out of a magazine. She went up a marble staircase, always following the sound that guided her like an invisible thread. She reached a hallway with several doors, and the crying was clearly coming from one of them. Hope took a deep breath and pushed the door open slowly. The sight she found touched her heart in a way she had never experienced. Two little boys, about her brother John's age, were sitting on the floor between two enormous beds that looked like race cars. They had everything money could buy, toys scattered everywhere, beautiful clothes, a room that was larger than her entire house. But their pale faces and sad eyes told a completely different story. "Hi," Hope said softly, so as not to startle them. Arthur and Philip lifted their tear-stained faces and stared at her in surprise. There was no fear in their eyes, only curiosity. Hope looked like a child like them, someone who might understand what they were feeling. "Who are you?" Arthur asked, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt. "My name is Hope," she replied, entering the room slowly. "I heard you crying and came to see if you were okay." "How did you get in here?" Philip asked. "Through the back door. It was open." Hope sat on the floor, at the boys' level, so as not to seem threatening. "Why are you crying?" Arthur and Philip looked at each other, as they always did when they needed to decide if they could trust someone. There was something different about this girl. She didn't speak with that forcedly cheerful voice that adults used with them. She spoke as if she really wanted to know the answer. "We're hungry," Arthur finally said. "But we can't eat," Philip added. Hope frowned, trying to understand. "Why can't you eat? Are you sick?" "I don't know," Arthur replied. "The food doesn't seem to have any taste. And our stomach feels heavy when we try to swallow," Philip explained. Hope nodded, understanding something that no doctor had managed to grasp. She recognized those symptoms because she had felt them herself. It was the emotional hunger she had experienced in the first weeks after her mother died. when the most delicious food tasted like cardboard in her mouth. "Are you feeling lonely?" she asked gently. The two boys stared at her in surprise. How did she know? "Sometimes," Arthur admitted. "Always," Philip corrected, being more honest than his brother. Hope gave a sad smile. "I know how that feels. When my mum went away, I couldn't eat either. It felt like the food had lost its flavor." "Your mum went away?" Arthur asked. "She went to heaven," Hope explained. "But before she went, she taught me something very important." "What?" they both asked at the same time. "She said that when we're sad, food only tastes good. Again, when it's prepared with care and shared with love." Hope opened the bag she was carrying and took out the honey cookies she had found at the French bakery. They were small, simple, nothing compared to the imported sweets these boys were used to seeing. But there was something special in the way she held them. "These cookies aren't fancy," she said, breaking each one in half. "I found them at a bakery, but they were made with care by someone who wanted to make other people happy. And now I want to share them with you because when we share food with someone we like, it tastes better." Arthur hesitated. "But what if I can't swallow?" "That's okay," Hope replied. "Let's try a little bit at a time. If you can't, it's no problem at all." She handed half a cookie to each of the boys. They took them carefully as if they were something very precious. "Now, before you eat, you're going to think of something good," Hope instructed. "It can be a warm hug, a happy moment, something that makes you smile on the inside." Arthur closed his eyes and thought of his father coming home from a trip and playing with cars with him on the floor. Philip thought of his twin brother, of the certainty that he would never be alone as long as Arthur was by his side. "Now taste it slowly," Hope said, also eating a piece of the cookie. The boys brought the cookies to their mouths. The sweet, buttery flavor exploded on their taste buds like a symphony that had been silent for weeks. It was as if their mouths had rediscovered what flavor was. They chewed slowly, savoring every bite, feeling a satisfaction that went far beyond the food itself. "It's delicious," Arthur exclaimed, his eyes shining. "Very delicious," Philip agreed. Hope smiled, feeling a deep joy fill her chest. "It's because you ate with a happy heart." The three of them finished the cookies in silence, but it wasn't a sad silence. It was a comfortable silence, the kind you feel when you're in good company. Arthur and Philip seemed different, as if something inside them had been switched back on. "Do you want me to tell you a story?" Hope asked. They both nodded eagerly. Hope began to tell the story of the brave princess who took care of the enchanted kingdom, the same one she told John and Mary. But this time she adapted the story, including two twin princes who had lost their joy and a magical girl who had appeared to teach them how to laugh again. "And the princes discovered that the real magic wasn't in the castle's treasures," she narrated in a soft voice, "but in the sincere affection that people shared with each other." Arthur and Philip listened, captivated. It had been so long since someone had told them a story just for them, without cameras, without rushing, without interruptions from a cell phone. It was at that moment that Richard came home. He had finished the meeting with the lawyer early and decided to come home to have lunch with his sons. He had spent the previous night thinking about the conversation he had with Arthur and Philip, and he was determined to radically change his approach as a father. He went straight up the stairs to the boys' room, planning to suggest a walk in the park or a board game, anything to make them smile. But when he pushed open the door to the room, he was not prepared for the scene he found. An unknown girl, clearly from a much different social class than his family, was sitting on the floor between his sons. All three were laughing softly, and there were cookie crumbs scattered on the Persian carpet. Arthur and Philip looked more alive than he had seen them in weeks. Richard stood frozen at the door, trying to process what he was seeing. Who was this girl? How had she gotten into his house? And why did his sons seem so well in her presence? "Daddy!" Arthur exclaimed, getting up quickly. "Look, this is Hope. She brought us magic cookies." "Magic cookies?" Richard repeated, still confused. "Yeah, Daddy," Philip confirmed. "They made us able to eat again." Richard looked at Hope, who had stood up and was looking at him with a mixture of fear and determination. She knew she could be in trouble for entering without permission, but she didn't regret helping those children. "What's your name?" Richard asked, trying to keep his tone gentle so as not to scare his sons. "Hope Smith, sir," she replied, lowering her head. "I'm very sorry for entering without permission. I heard them crying and—" "You got them to eat," Richard interrupted, getting straight to the point that interested him most. "Yes, sir, they ate some cookies." Richard looked at his sons, who seemed different. There was color in their cheeks again, and their eyes had a sparkle he hadn't seen in weeks. "How did you manage that?" he asked, genuinely curious. Hope hesitated, trying to find words to explain something she understood intuitively. "They were hungry in their hearts, sir. When you're sad on the inside, the food doesn't go down. I've been through that when my mother died." "Hungry in their hearts," Richard repeated, feeling those words echo in his mind. "Yeah, Daddy," Arthur said. "Hope said that when we eat thinking about good things and with someone who likes us, the food tastes good again." Richard knelt beside his sons, still trying to absorb everything. "And you really managed to eat?" "We did!" they both exclaimed at the same time, showing the crumbs still stuck to the corners of their mouths. It was at that moment that tears began to stream down Richard's face. He had hired the best doctors in New York, had spent fortunes on consultations and tests, and an 8-year-old girl had achieved in half an hour what no specialist had managed in 2 weeks. "Thank you so much," he said to Hope, his voice choked with emotion. "You saved my sons." Hope smiled shyly. "I just did what my mum taught me, sir. To care with love." "And where are your parents?" Richard asked, noticing the unusual maturity of this child. "My mum is in heaven and I never knew my dad. I take care of my younger siblings, John and Mary." "You take care of younger siblings by yourself?" "Yes, sir. Mrs. Rose helps, but I'm the one. I'm responsible for them." Richard felt even more moved. This girl, who had not even half the resources his sons had learned to truly care, while he and Vivian, with all their possibilities, had failed to provide what mattered most: loving presence. "Dad, can Hope stay for lunch?" Philip asked. "Please, Dad," Arthur pleaded. "She tells really cool stories." Richard looked at Hope, who seemed to be preparing to politely decline. "Would you like to have lunch with us, Hope?" "Thank you, sir, but I need to go back home. My siblings must be hungry and Mrs. Rose is watching them." "And where do you live?" "In Hope Village, sir. It's kind of far from here." Richard did a mental calculation. For a child on foot, it must be at least a 2-hour walk. "How did you end up here so far from home?" Hope told him about her search for bread at the French bakery, about how she had followed the boys' cries until she found them. She told her story without shame, but also without self-pity. It was simply her life. "Hope," Richard said after hearing the whole story, "I'd like to make you a proposal." "What proposal?" "Sir, I'd like to take you home, meet your siblings, and talk about how I can help you. You did something extraordinary for my sons today. You brought them back to life." Hope hesitated. "You don't have to, sir. I didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did," Arthur insisted. "You brought the magic cookies." "And taught us to eat with a happy heart," Philip added. It was at that moment that Vivian appeared at the bedroom door, drawn by the lively voices coming from upstairs. When she saw the scene, her husband kneeling on the floor talking to a clearly poor girl, her sons with traces of food on their faces and crumbs scattered on the expensive carpet, her expression changed instantly. "Richard, what is going on here? Who is this child?" Vivian's voice cut through the room like a sharp blade, loaded with an authority that tolerated no questions. Her eyes quickly scanned the scene: the crumbs on the imported Persian carpet, the ragged girl sitting on the floor of her son's room, and Richard kneeling as if he were asking favors from a street child. "Richard, I asked who this child is and what she's doing in our room," she repeated, raising her tone slightly. Hope stood up immediately, sensing the change in the atmosphere. The joy that had filled the room just moments before seemed to have been sucked out by an invisible vacuum. She recognized that tone of voice, that posture. She had dealt with adults who saw her as a threat simply for existing. "Mommy, this is Hope," Arthur said, running towards his mother with an excitement Vivian hadn't seen in weeks. "She brought magic cookies, and we were able to eat again." Vivian looked at her son as if he were speaking a foreign language. Magic cookies, Arthur, what are you talking about? It's true, Mummy, Philip joined his brother. Hope taught us to eat with a happy heart. Richard stood up slowly, preparing for a difficult conversation. Vivian, this girl managed to do what no doctor could. Our sons have started eating again. Started eating again? Vivian looked suspiciously at the scattered crumbs. Richard, they ate some old cookies that a street kid brought from who knows where. That's not starting to eat again, that's a danger. Danger? Richard frowned. Vivian, are you looking at our sons? They're alive again. Vivian approached Arthur and Philip, examining them as if looking for signs of poisoning. You ate this dirty food. Don't you know you could get sick? That you could catch some disease? The joy on the boys' faces began to fade. They looked at each other, confused. Had they done something wrong by accepting Hope's cookies? It's not dirty, Mummy, Arthur murmured. It was delicious. And Hope is our friend, Philip defended. Friend? Vivian looked at Hope with an expression that would chill any child's blood. Girl, how did you get into my house? Who let you in? Hope lowered her head, feeling small, in the face of the woman's hostility. Ma'am, I heard them crying and you trespassed on my property. Vivian cut her off. That's a crime. Richard, how can you be calmly talking to a trespasser? Vivian, stop. Richard placed himself between his wife and Hope. She didn't trespass. She saved our sons. Saved them? Richard, have you lost your mind? This girl could have kidnapped our children. She could have done anything. Mommy, don't talk about Hope like that. Arthur stood protectively beside his new friend. She's good. Arthur, get away from there now, Vivian ordered. Philip, you too. Go. To the bathroom, wash your mouths and brush your teeth. We don't know what kind of bacteria that food had. The boys hesitated, looking between their parents and Hope. For the first time in weeks, they had felt truly happy, and now that happiness was being treated as something dangerous and dirty. It's okay, boys, you can go, Hope said gently, sensing the growing tension. Everything's fine. But are you leaving? Philip asked, fear in his voice. I have to go home anyway. My siblings are waiting for me. Arthur approached and hugged Hope quickly. Thanks for the magic cookies. Philip did the same. And for the story about the princess. Hope hugged both boys, feeling her heart ache. Remember what I taught you, okay? When you eat, think of good things and feel the love in your heart. After the boys left the room, the silence grew heavy. Vivian crossed her arms in a battle stance, while Richard tried to find the words to explain what he had witnessed. Hope, he finally said, are you sure you don't want me to take you home? It's a very long walk. Thank you, sir, but I can get back on my own. Of course she'll get back on her own, Vivian exploded, and preferably never come back. What kind of upbringing is this? Entering other people's houses without permission? Hope flinched, but maintained her dignity. Ma'am, I'm sorry if I caused any trouble. I just wanted to help. Help? You think breaking into people's houses is helping? Vivian, that's enough. Richard raised his voice for the first time. You're being cruel to a child who has only done good. Cruel? I'm protecting our family. You have no idea what kind of problems this situation could cause. What problems? What if she comes back with other people? What if this is a scam? What if she tells her friends where we live? Our security could be compromised. Richard looked at his wife, as if seeing her for the first time. Vivian, are you listening to yourself? She's an 8-year-old child. A child who broke into our house and could have done anything to our sons. Hope headed for the door, feeling that her presence was only causing more conflict. I'll go now. Sorry for the trouble. Wait, Richard gently held her arm. At least let me have my driver take you home. No way, Vivian protested. Richard, you are not sending our employee into the middle of the ghetto. Hope Village isn't a ghetto, Hope corrected quietly but firmly. It's a poor neighborhood, but it's where I live with dignity. The response surprised Richard with its maturity and lack of anger. Even while being verbally attacked, this girl maintained her composure and defended her origins without shame or aggression. You're right, he said. I'm sorry for generalizing. Will you at least let me call a cab? No need, sir. I like to walk. It gives me time to think. Hope headed for the door but stopped and looked back. Mr. Richard, can you ask them to remember to eat while thinking of good things? Their bodies already know how to do it again. After she left, Richard and Vivian were alone in the room, with the cookie crumbs still scattered on the floor, as evidence of a miracle that had happened and been interrupted. "Richard, you need to understand the gravity of this situation," Vivian began, trying to regain control. "Imagine if this becomes bad news. Businessman's sons fed by street girl. How will that look for our image?" "Our image?" Richard stared at her in disbelief. "Our sons were starving emotionally, and your concern is our image. Don't be dramatic, they weren't dying." "Yes, they were, Vivian. And you know it." Vivian sat on Arthur's bed, suddenly looking tired. "Richard, I'm doing my best. You have no idea the pressure I'm under to keep everything perfect." "Perfect for whom? For your social media followers, or for our sons?" "For our family. Everything I do is to protect our family." "Protect them from what? From true love?" The silence that followed was broken by the boys' voices in the bathroom, chattering excitedly about hope and the magic cookies. It was the first time in weeks that Richard had heard them speak with such energy. "I'm going after her," he said, heading for the door. "Richard, no! I'm going after her, Vivian. I'm going to take her home. I'm going to meet her siblings, and I'm going to understand how an 8-year-old child managed to do what an entire medical team couldn't. If you do that, you'll be putting our family at unnecessary risk." "Our family was already at risk, Vivian. The risk was losing our sons to sadness, and that girl brought them back." Richard left the room in search of hope, but by the time he got downstairs, she was already gone. He went out into the street and saw her in the distance, walking with an upright posture and her bag on her shoulder. He thought about running after her, but something made him stop. There was a dignity in the way she walked that deserved to be respected. He returned home with a growing determination. He needed to better understand what had happened, and that meant questioning things he had never questioned before about his own family. That afternoon, as Arthur and Philip showed a renewed appetite at snack time, Richard watched Vivian preparing her phone for her daily recordings. She had touched up her makeup and fixed her hair, assuming the public persona that had become her second nature. "Hi, my loves," she began, speaking to the camera with a radiant smile. "Today I want to talk about the importance of protecting our children from negative influences that can appear disguised as kindness." Richard stopped drinking his coffee and paid full attention to what his wife was saying. Sometimes people with bad intentions may try to approach our children by offering things that seem harmless but can actually be very dangerous. As conscious mothers, we must always be alert. "Vivian," Richard interrupted her. "What are you doing?" She paused the recording, annoyed by the interruption. "I'm recording my content for the day." "Are you talking about hope?" "I'm warning my audience about risky situations that can happen to any family." "Risk? Vivian, that girl saved our sons." "Richard, you don't understand anything about digital influence. I have a responsibility to my 2 million followers. I need to guide them on family safety." "You're turning a miracle into horror." "Content," Vivian sighed, putting her phone away. "It's not horror, it's precaution, and it's my job. Your job is destroying our real family in the name of a virtual one." "What an exaggeration, Richard." "Exaggeration? Our sons spent 2 weeks without eating because you were more concerned with maintaining the appearance of a perfect mother than with understanding what was really happening to them." "That's not true, isn't it? How many times in the last 2 weeks did you sit on the floor to talk with them without recording? How many times did you offer your full attention without a phone in your hand?" Vivian remained silent because she knew the answer would be devastating. "I'll tell you how many," Richard continued. "None. 0 times. You documented their crisis, but you didn't live their crisis. I was taking care of them. I took them to all the doctors." "You took them, filmed it, posted about taking them, but you didn't listen to what they were really trying to say." That night, after the boys fell asleep after eating a normal dinner for the first time in weeks, Richard locked himself in his office and did something he hadn't done in years. He reflected deeply on his life. He began to remember details he had ignored, how the boys always seemed to perform joy when Vivian was recording, how they were naturally more spontaneous when she wasn't around, how Arthur had stopped showing his drawings to his mother after she had commented during a live stream that children's scribbles weren't worthy of a frame. And then he began to question other things. Why did Vivian always change the subject when he asked about the time she was pregnant? Why had she fired the nanny, Carmen, so abruptly, claiming only differences of opinion on childcare? Why did the boys seem more attached to Carmen than to their own mother, and why did that irritate her so much? Richard decided it was time to make some calls. He would start with the nanny, Carmen, who had cared for the boys from birth until she was fired 6 months ago. If there were answers to be found, Carmen might have some of them. He found her number in his old phone contacts and called, even though it was almost 11 at night. Carmen, this is Richard Anderson. I'm sorry to call so late, but I really need to talk to you about Arthur and Philip. Can we meet tomorrow? The pause on the other end of the line was significant before Carmen replied, Mr. Richard, I've been waiting for this call for months. Yes, we can talk, and there's a lot you need to know. That night, while Richard planned a conversation that would change his life forever on the other side of the city, Hope arrived home to find John and Mary waiting for her on the porch. Sis, you took so long, John complained, running to hug her. Where did you go? Hopey, Mary asked, clinging to her sister's skirt. I went to help some sad children, Hope explained, hugging both her siblings. But I'm here now and we're going to have dinner together. Mrs. Rose appeared at the door, relieved. Girl, I was getting worried. You never take this long. I'm sorry, Mrs. Rose, it was a different kind of day. As she prepared dinner with the ingredients she had gotten from the market, Hope told her siblings about Arthur and Philip, about how they had rediscovered the pleasure of eating, about the large but cold mansion where they lived. They have everything a rich person has, but they were sad? John asked, trying to understand. Sometimes, John, having a lot of things isn't the same as having real love. It's good that you taught them how to be happy, Mary said. Yes, sis, you're good at taking care of people, John agreed. Hope smiled, feeling a deep peace in her heart. She had done what she knew how to do best, care with true love. She didn't imagine that the encounter of a few hours had planted seeds that would transform not only the lives of the rich boys, but also her own life in ways she could not yet imagine. What she didn't know was that, at that very moment, Richard was discovering truths that would shake the entire foundation of the Anderson family, and that soon her simple but dignified life would intersect again with that world of luxury and appearances in ways that would change everything forever. The meeting with Carmen took place on Saturday morning in a quiet cafe in Midtown Manhattan. Richard arrived promptly at 9, finding the former nanny already waiting at a corner table. Carmen Rodriguez, a 45-year-old woman with a kind smile and eyes that revealed all the wisdom acquired in 20 years of caring for children, stood up to greet him. Mr. Richard, thank you for coming. Thank you for meeting me, Carmen, and please, just call me Richard. I don't think formalities will make sense for the conversation we need to have. Carmen nodded, sitting back down. There was a heaviness in her expression, as if she had been carrying a burden for a long time. Richard, before we begin, I need you to know that I always loved Arthur and Philip as if they were my own grandchildren. Everything I'm about to tell you is because I care about their well-being. I know, Carmen, they always spoke of you with affection. In fact, they still do. How are they? I heard they were having some eating problems. Richard briefly recounted the past few weeks, the doctors, the desperation and the miracle on Thursday with a girl named Hope. Carmen listened in silence, nodding in understanding. I'm not surprised that a child managed to help them when the adults failed. Arthur and Philip are very sensitive boys. They can feel when affection is genuine and when it's a performance. A performance? Carmen took a deep breath. Richard, there are things about your family you need to know, things I should have told you a long time ago, but Vivian threatened me to never reveal. Richard's heart raced. What kind of things? First, about why I was fired. It wasn't because of differences of opinion on childcare, as she said. Then why? Carmen picked up her coffee cup with trembling hands. I discovered something Vivian didn't want anyone to know. And when I confronted her, she fired me on the spot and threatened me with a defamation lawsuit if I told anyone. What did you discover? Richard, Arthur, and Philip are not your biological sons. The words fell on Richard like a lightning bolt from a clear sky. He was silent for long seconds, trying to process what he had just heard. What did you say? They are the sons of another man, someone Vivian had an affair with during your marriage. Richard felt as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. How do you know this? Because I saw the conversations on her phone. Messages to a man named Thomas Mendoza, talking about the boys, about how they were growing up to look like him, and I saw photos. Photos? Of the man with the children, in places that were clearly not casual encounters. It was a relationship, Richard, and it lasted for years. Richard ran his hands over his face, feeling a mixture of pain, anger, and strangely relief. How long have you known this? I found out 6 months before I was fired. I spent weeks wondering if I should tell you, because I knew it would be devastating. But when I finally got the courage and confronted Vivian, she fired me and said that if I opened my mouth, she would sue me for slander and make sure to ruin my professional reputation. And you have proof? Carmen hesitated. I have some photos I took of her phone before I was fired. It wasn't right of me, but my instinct told me to keep some evidence. Can you show me? Carmen took out her phone and showed him some photos. Richard saw images of a tall, dark-haired man with physical features that were undeniably similar to Arthur and Philip's. The shape of their eyes, the smile, the facial structure. It was like looking at an adult version of the boys. My God, Richard whispered. There's more, Carmen continued. Vivian was always obsessed with keeping the boys away from you during their early years. Remember how she always made excuses for you not to attend doctor's appointments, birthday parties, school plays? Richard remembered. At the time he had interpreted it as excessive maternal zeal, but now it made sense in a sinister way. She was afraid someone would comment on the physical resemblance or lack thereof between you and the boys. And why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you wait for me to call? Carmen looked down. Because I was a coward, Richard. Vivian threatened me not only with a lawsuit, but she said she would make sure I'd never get another job caring for children in New York. And I need to work. I have a daughter in medical school, and I can't afford to lose my professional reputation. Richard nodded, understanding. And now? Now the boys are older and are showing signs that they need real emotional care. When you said on the phone that they were having eating problems, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. They've always been sensitive children who could feel when something was wrong in the family environment. Carmen, do you think they know anything? Unconsciously, perhaps. Children perceive tensions that adults think they're hiding, and they always felt there was something different in the way Vivian related to them. How so? She treated them like accessories, Richard, like perfect little dolls that existed to complete her image on social media. There was no real maternal spontaneity. It was all very calculated, very performative. Richard thought of all the times he had interpreted Vivian's dedication to the boys as intense maternal love, when in fact, it could have been guilt, paranoia, or simply the need to keep up appearances. What do you advise me to do? Carmen looked him directly in the eye. Get a DNA test, Richard. Not out of curiosity, but to have legal certainty. Because regardless of the result, you're going to have to make important decisions about the future of this family. And if it confirms they're not my biological sons, will that change anything about the love you feel for them? Richard didn't hesitate. Nothing. They have been my sons in my heart for 6 years. DNA won't change that. Then the test is for you to have legal arguments against Vivian, because a woman who lied about something so fundamental might be lying about many other things. Do you have any other information I should know? Carmen hesitated again. There are financial issues too, Richard. Remember that bank account Vivian said was to save money for the boys' future. I remember. She used part of that money to support her parallel relationship, trips, gifts, even an apartment she maintained in a third party's name. Richard felt anger rise in his chest but controlled himself. Do you have evidence of this too? I have some statements she left scattered around her office. At the time I thought it was strange and kept them because it didn't make sense for her to spend so much money on things that weren't for the boys. Carmen, Are you willing to testify about all of this if necessary? Yes, Richard. For the boys, I am. The meeting lasted another 2 hours, with Carmen detailing everything she had observed during years of daily life with the family. When they parted, Richard knew exactly what steps to take. On Monday, while Vivian was at a photo shoot for a cosmetics brand, Richard went to a private lab for a DNA test. He also hired a private investigator to track the suspicious financial movements and locate evidence of the extramarital affair. The results arrived the following Thursday. As expected, they confirmed that Arthur and Philip were not his biological sons. But Richard's reaction was different from what he himself had imagined. Instead of pain, he felt a strange sense of relief. He finally had answers to questions he didn't even know he should be asking. Armed with irrefutable proof, Richard confronted Vivian that same night. "Vivian, I need to talk to you. Sit down." She was touching up her makeup for a nightly live stream. "Love, can it be quick? I have a commitment at 8. "Your commitment will have to wait." Richard placed the documents on the coffee table. "I want you to look at this." Vivian picked up the papers and her expression changed drastically as she understood what she was seeing. "Richard, what is this?" "It's proof that Arthur and Philip are not my biological sons. And it's also proof that you spent money from their educational account supporting your relationship with Thomas Mendoza." The silence that followed was deafening. Vivian tried to speak several times, but the words wouldn't come out. "How many years, Vivian? How many years did you make a fool of me?" "Richard, I can explain." "Explain." Vivian broke down. She told him about how she had met Thomas at a digital influencer event, how she had become emotionally involved, how the pregnancy had been an accident that she decided to attribute to Richard so as not to destroy their marriage. "I was pregnant and didn't know what to do. Thomas didn't want to take responsibility. He told me to figure it out, so I thought it would be better for everyone if you believed they were your sons." "Better for everyone? Vivian, you stole 6 years of my life, 6 years living a lie. But you love them. You always have." "Of course I love them. That's not the point. The point is that you built our entire family on a lie. And now, are you going to expose me publicly? Are you going to destroy my career?" Richard looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "Your concern even now is your career." "Richard, I have 2 million followers. Do you have any idea what that means economically? And I have 2 sons I need to protect from a mother who sees them as content for social media." In the days that followed, the Anderson family's life changed completely. Richard filed for divorce on grounds of breach of trust and fraud. He requested full custody of the boys, using their emotional neglect and the eating problems they had developed under Vivian's care as his main arguments. The most surprising thing was Arthur and Philip's reaction. When Richard explained in an age-appropriate way that he had discovered they had another biological father, but that it wouldn't change his love for them in any way, the boys seemed relieved. "Are you still going to be our dad?" Arthur asked. "Forever. Nothing will change that." "And Mommy?" "Your mother will still be your mother. But you'll live with me and she can visit you whenever she wants." "And Hope? Can we see her again?" Philip asked. It was at that moment that Richard made the decision that would change everything. "Yes, we'll look for her. I want to get to know the girl who saved you." The reunion with Hope happened on a sunny Saturday. Richard drove to Hope Village, accompanied by Arthur and Philip, who were bursting with excitement. They found Hope taking care of John and Mary in the small yard of her house, teaching her brother to write the letters of the alphabet on a makeshift blackboard. "Hope!" the twins shouted when they saw her. She stood up in surprise and broke into a radiant smile. "Arthur, Philip, what a wonderful surprise." Richard watched the interaction between the 3 children and felt his heart warm. There was a naturalness, a genuine joy that he hadn't seen in a long time. "These are my siblings," Hope introduced proudly. "John and Mary." "Hi," John said shyly, hiding behind his sister. Mary waved her little hand, giving a toothless smile. "And this is the boy's father," Hope said to her siblings. "Mr. Richard." "A pleasure to meet you," Richard said, kneeling to be at the children's level. Hope has told me a lot about you. During the visit, Richard got to know the reality of Hope's family. He saw how she cared for her siblings with absolute dedication, how she turned limitations into creativity, how she offered genuine love despite having so little in material terms. He also met Mrs. Rose, who told him about the girl's dedication, how she never missed school despite all her responsibilities, how she shared everything she had with those who needed it more. "Mr. Richard," Hope said as they were leaving, "thank you for bringing them to see me. They look so much better. Actually, Hope, I came here to make a proposal." "What proposal?" "I want you and your siblings to come live with me." The silence that followed was total. Hope's eyes widened, trying to understand if she had heard correctly. "What do you mean, sir?" "I want to offer a home to the three of you, a better life, private school for everyone, guaranteed food, safety, and most importantly, I want you to continue being this wonderful influence in Arthur and Philip's lives. But, sir, I can't accept charity." "It's not charity, Hope, it's gratitude. And it's a necessity. My sons need you. You taught them something I had forgotten, how to live with a happy heart." "And Mrs. Rose?" "Mrs. Rose is also invited. If she wants, she can be our housekeeper, with a fair salary and all the benefits." Hope looked at her siblings, who were staring at her with expectation, then at Mrs. Rose, who had tears in her eyes. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But I want you to know that you wouldn't be guests in our house. You would be family." A week later, Hope, John and Mary moved into the Anderson mansion, but not as dependents or additions. Richard had arranged all the legal documentation to formalize a supportive adoption, ensuring that the three children had the same rights and opportunities as Arthur and Philip. The transformation in the house was immediate. The once silent hallways filled with genuine laughter. The perfect garden gained makeshift swings and scattered toys. The kitchen became a gathering place where Hope taught everyone else to cook with love. Arthur and Philip blossomed like never before. With Hope around, they rediscovered not only the pleasure of eating, but the pleasure of living. John and Mary adapted quickly to their new reality, but maintained the simplicity and gratitude they had learned through hardship. The reunion with Hope happened on a sunny Saturday. Richard drove to Hope Village, accompanied by Arthur and Philip, who were bursting with excitement. They found Hope taking care of John and Mary in the small yard of her house, teaching her brother to write the letters of the alphabet on a makeshift blackboard. "Hope!" the twins shouted when they saw her. She stood up in surprise and broke into a radiant smile. "Arthur, Philip, what a wonderful surprise!" Richard watched the interaction between the three children and felt his heart warm. There was a naturalness, a genuine joy that he hadn't seen in a long time. "These are my siblings," Hope introduced proudly, "John and Mary." "Hi," John said shyly, hiding behind his sister. Mary waved her little hand, giving a toothless smile. "And this is the boy's father," Hope said to her siblings. "Mr. Richard." "A pleasure to meet you," Richard said, kneeling to be at the children's level. "Hope has told me a lot about you." During the visit, Richard got to know the reality of Hope's family. He saw how she cared for her siblings with absolute dedication, how she turned limitations into creativity, how she offered genuine love despite having so little in material terms. He also met Mrs. Rose, who told him about the girl's dedication, how she never missed school despite all her responsibilities, how she shared everything she had with those who needed it more. "Mr. Richard," Hope said as they were leaving, "thank you for bringing them to see me. They look so much better." "Actually, Hope, I came here to make a proposal." "What proposal?" "I want you and your siblings to come live with me." The silence that followed was total. Hope's eyes widened, trying to understand if she had heard correctly. "What do you mean, sir?" "I want to offer a home to the three of you, a better life, private school, for everyone, guaranteed food, safety, and most importantly, I want you to continue being this wonderful influence in Arthur and Philip's lives." "But, sir, I can't accept charity." "It's not charity, Hope. It's gratitude. And it's a necessity. My sons need you. You taught them something I had forgotten, how to live with a happy heart. But at the exact moment Richard was making this proposal that would forever change the lives of those children, something unexpected happened. Richard's phone rang with a call that would take everything in a completely different direction than he had imagined. Richard looked at the phone ringing insistently in his pocket. The name of his lawyer, Mr. Michael Sanders, appeared on the screen. A call on a Saturday could only mean something urgent related to the divorce proceedings. "Excuse me, I need to take this," he said to Hope, stepping a few feet away. "Mr. Sanders, you're calling on a weekend. It must be something important." "Richard, I need to talk to you urgently. Vivian has done something that could greatly complicate our situation. Where are you?" The lawyer's concerned tone made Richard's stomach clench. "I'm in Hope Village visiting the girl who helped my sons." "Why? What happened?" "She posted a video on social media last night that has gone viral. Over 5 million views so far. And it's not good." "What kind of video?" "A video of her crying, telling her side of the story. She portrayed herself as an abandoned and betrayed mother, said you're trying to take her children away to be with an invading girl who manipulated the children. The internet is divided, but a significant portion of her followers are on her side." Richard closed his eyes, feeling a headache start. "And what does this change legally?" "It could change a lot. The judge might interpret that you are exposing the children to an unstable situation by wanting to include a completely strange family in the family dynamic. And there's another problem." "What?" "Child Protective Services has already been called. Someone reported that you are trying to buy needy children by offering housing in exchange for care for your own children. They want a full investigation." Richard felt his legs weaken. He looked at Hope, who was playing with all her siblings in the yard, completely oblivious to the storm brewing around her. "Mr. Sanders, this is ridiculous. I just want to help a family in need and keep the person who saved my sons close." "I know, Richard, but we need to be strategic. Vivian's video had such an impact that it has already appeared on television shows. Some hosts are questioning your motives, suggesting it could be some kind of scheme." "What kind of scheme?" "From child exploitation to money laundering using charities. You know how the media works. They create conspiracy theories about anything." Richard ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of a situation that was completely spiraling out of his control. "What do you advise me to do?" "First, go home immediately without taking those children. Second, don't make any formal proposal until we resolve the issue with Child Protective Services. Third, you need to prepare for a narrative war." "A narrative war?" "Vivian has 2 million followers and is using all of them to build a version of the story where she is the victim and you are the villain, using poor children to emotionally blackmail the judicial system." Richard hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of anger and despair. How had something so pure and simple become so complicated? He looked at Arthur and Philip, who were running around the yard playing tag with John and Mary, their laughter echoing in the afternoon air. How would he explain to them that they might not be able to see Hope anymore? "Did something happen?" Hope asked, approaching with an intuition that only very sensitive children possess. Richard hesitated. He didn't want to worry this girl who had already been through so much in her life. "It's complicated, Hope. Some people are creating problems because of our friendship." "Because of me?" "Not because of you. Because of adults who don't understand that true friendship has no social barriers." Hope nodded with a wisdom beyond her 8 years. "My mum always said that when you do good, someone always shows up to try to turn good into bad. Your mother was very wise. Mr. Richard, are you worried that I won't be able to see Arthur and Philip anymore?" The direct question touched Richard's heart. "I'm worried that some people might try to complicate our friendship, yes. What if I promise I won't ask for anything from you, that I just want to keep being their friend?" "Hope, you never asked for anything. From day one, you only gave. The problem isn't you, it's the world of adults that is too complicated." At that moment, Mrs. Rose appeared on the porch with a worried expression. "Richard, there have been some strange cars parked on the corner for over an hour, and some people with cameras." Richard felt his blood run cold. The press had found Hope's address. "Hope, I need you and your siblings to go inside now and don't come out until I say you can. Why? Because there are people out there who want to turn our story into news, and that could be dangerous for you. Hope quickly gathered John and Mary, her life experience on the streets, giving her a natural instinct for detecting danger. Arthur and Philip need to come inside too. Yes, everyone inside. In the following minutes, Richard watched from the living room window as reporters positioned themselves outside the house. He could identify at least 3 different television networks. His phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. Hello? Mr. Richard Anderson, this is Vanessa Carter from the show City Alert. We'd like to do an interview with you about the situation involving your sons and the girl from Hope Village. I'm not interested. Mr. Richard, your ex-wife has already given an interview to our competitor. It would be interesting to hear your side of the story. I said I'm not interested. Richard hung up the phone. Immediately, another number called. Mr. Anderson, this is John Charles from Time magazine. We want to better understand the dynamic between your family and the girl Hope Smith. Richard hung up again, but the calls didn't stop. In less than half an hour, he had received calls from 12 different media outlets. What's happening? Hope asked, seeing Richard's agitation. The story about how you helped my sons has leaked to the press, and unfortunately, they are turning something beautiful into something sensational. Sensational? They're making things up that don't exist to make the story more interesting for TV viewers. Arthur approached the window and saw the cameras. Dad, why are there so many people outside? Because sometimes, son, when adults do good things, other adults don't believe it's possible to do good without having ulterior motives. But you just want to help Hope because she helped us, Philip said with the simple logic of a child. Exactly, but not everyone understands that. Richard's phone rang once more. This time it was Mr. Sanders again. Richard, the situation has worsened. Child Protective Services is on their way to Hope Village right now. They want to assess the children's situation and understand your intentions. My intentions? Mr. Sanders, my intentions are the most transparent in the world. I know, but you need to be prepared. The social worker, Dr. Helen Fields, is coming, and she's known for being very strict. Anything she interprets as inappropriate could result in a restriction of contact between you and these children. Restriction of contact? They could determine that you can no longer visit or have contact with Hope and her siblings until the investigation is concluded. Richard felt the world spin around him. In a matter of hours, his attempt to do good had turned into a bureaucratic nightmare. How long could this investigation take? Months, Richard. And during that time, you could also have problems with the custody of Arthur and Philip. If Child Protective Services believes you are exposing your own children to an unstable situation, they could recommend that they temporarily stay with Vivian. That's absurd. Here's the reality of the system. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, and now you need to be very careful. Richard hung up the phone and sat on the small sofa in Hope's living room, feeling the weight of all the complications that had arisen from something as pure as gratitude. Mr. Richard, Hope said, sitting next to him, are you sorry you came here? Richard looked at this extraordinary girl and felt his heart ache. Never, Hope. I will never regret meeting you and your family. Then it doesn't matter what the complicated adults say. What matters is that Arthur and Philip are happy, and that's because of us. You're right. And what if they say we can't see each other anymore? Richard took a deep breath. If that happens, we'll wait as long as necessary. But I promise I will fight for you to remain a part of our lives. It was at that moment that there was a knock on the door. Mrs. Rose peeked through the window and confirmed what they all feared. It's Child Protective Services. Dr. Helen Fields was a 50-year-old woman with grey hair tied in a severe bun, heavy-rimmed glasses, and a folder full of documents. She entered the house accompanied by 2 assistants and a police officer. Mr. Richard Anderson? That's me. And are these the children Hope, John, and Mary Smith? Yes. I need to ask a few questions. First, I'd like to speak with the children separately, then with you. Richard felt a tightness in his chest, but knew that resisting would only make things worse. Dr. Fields began by talking to Hope in a separate room. The questions were direct and investigative. How she had met Richard, What he had promised if anyone had coached her on what, to say if she felt pressured to accept the offer to move. Hope answered with the honesty that was her most striking characteristic. She told them about the day she found Arthur and Philip crying, about the cookies she had shared, about how she had taught the boys to eat with a happy heart. "And did Mr. Richard offer you anything in return for helping his sons?" Dr. Fields asked. "No, ma'am. I helped because they were sad. My mom taught me that when someone is sad, you help them. And then he offered for you to live in his house?" "Yes, he did. He said he wanted to repay the help I gave Arthur and Philip." "Do you feel you have to accept this offer?" Hope thought for a moment. "Ma'am, I don't have to accept anything. My siblings and I are fine here. But I would like to continue being friends with Arthur and Philip. And what if I told you it's better for everyone if you don't see each other for a while?" Hope felt her eyes fill with tears, but maintained her composure. "If it's better for them, I'll accept." The answer surprised Dr. Fields with its maturity and lack of manipulation. The interviews with John and Mary were briefer, appropriate for their age. Both confirmed that they liked Arthur and Philip, that Richard had been kind to them, and that Hope always took good care of everyone. When it was Richard's turn, he answered every question with absolute transparency. He explained about his son's eating crisis, how Hope had solved the problem, his gratitude, and his genuine desire to repay the help he had received. "Mr. Richard," Dr. Fields said after nearly 2 hours of interviews, "I understand your motivations, but I must warn you about some legal aspects of the situation." "What aspects?" "First, a change of custody for children in a situation of social vulnerability cannot be done informally, no matter how good your intentions are. Second, your unstable marital situation could be interpreted as an unsuitable environment to receive more children. But I just want to help, and I believe you. But the system needs guarantees. If you truly wish to help this family, you will have to follow the appropriate legal procedures." "What procedures?" "Registering in the foster care program, psychological evaluation of everyone involved, home inspection, a period of supervised cohabitation. The process could take between 6 months to 2 years. Richard felt discouragement wash over him. "And during that time?" "During that time, I recommend that you maintain distance to avoid forming emotional bonds that could be harmful if the adoption is not approved." "Harmful to whom?" "To the children mainly. They cannot be exposed to the instability of relationships that may not materialize." When Dr. Fields left, taking with her the assurance that there would be no more meetings until the situation was regularized, the room was plunged into a heavy silence. Arthur and Philip were confused and sad. Hope tried to console them, but her own eyes were welling up. John and Mary hid behind their sister, sensing that something bad had happened, even without fully understanding what. "Does this mean we won't see each other anymore?" Arthur asked, his voice breaking. "Not forever," Richard replied, trying to maintain some hope, "but maybe for a while." "Why do adults complicate everything?" Philip asked. Hope approached the two brothers and hugged them. "Listen, you two. You already know how to eat with a happy heart, right?" They nodded. "So it doesn't matter where I am. You'll still know how. And every time you eat thinking of good things, you'll be remembering me. And I'll be thinking of you too." "Promise?" they both asked. "I promise." Richard knelt beside the children. "And I promise I will do everything possible for you to see each other again. It might take a while, but I won't give up." When it was time to leave, the goodbyes were among the most painful. Arthur and Philip hugged Hope as if it were the last time they would see her. John and Mary didn't understand why their new friends couldn't stay longer. On the way back home, Richard drove in silence while the boys looked out the window with melancholic expressions. "Dad," Arthur finally said, "do you think we did something wrong?" "Never, son. You did everything right. The problem is that the adult world is sometimes very complicated." "Will Hope be okay?" Philip asked. "Yes, she will. Hope is a very strong and brave girl." "And will we see her again?" Richard looked in the rearview mirror at his sons in the back seat. "I will do everything I can to make that happen." That night, as Arthur and Philip slept hugging each other in the same bed for comfort, Richard stayed awake planning his next strategy. No matter how many bureaucratic obstacles appeared in his path, he would not give up on reuniting the family that had formed so naturally and purely. On the other side of the city, Hope also stayed awake, looking out the window at the stars. Mrs. Rose had tried to console her, saying everything would be fine, but she knew that life is sometimes unfair to those who deserve it least. But she had a certainty in her heart, the true love that had been born between those children was stronger than any obstacle the adults could create, and somehow, some way, they would find their way back to each other. Because a family of the heart is not broken by decrees or protocols. It is strengthened by distance and reunites when least expected. 3 months had passed since that painful Saturday in Hope Village. 3 long months during which Richard rigorously followed all the protocols required by Child Protective Services. He underwent a psychological evaluation, hired specialized social workers, began the process to register as a foster family, and endured bi-weekly home inspections that analyzed everything, from the safety of the pool to the nutritional quality of the food served to the children. Arthur and Philip went through periods of deep sadness, asking almost daily when they could see Hope again. Richard tried to keep their hope alive with cautious promises, but internally he fought against the discouragement of a bureaucratic system that seemed designed to deter even the best intentions. During this period, something unexpected happened. The story of Hope and the salvation cookies continued to circulate on social media, but now in a completely different way. Ordinary people began to share their own stories of children who had been saved by small gestures of love and generosity. The movement spread with the hashtag Hope's Cookies, and thousands of Americans began to tell similar cases of spontaneous solidarity. Vivian, who had initially managed to generate sympathy with her abandoned mother videos, began to lose credibility as followers more attentive exposed contradictory details in her versions. Some old fans noticed inconsistencies in the dates she mentioned, in her descriptions of events, and especially in the coldness with which she spoke of her own children, always focusing more on the injustice done to her than on the well-being of Arthur and Philip. The turning point came when Carmen, the former nanny, decided to break her silence. Motivated by the social media movement and the injustice she saw being committed against Richard and Hope, she recorded a detailed video telling the whole truth about the Anderson family. She spoke about the emotional neglect, the lies about paternity, about how Vivian had always treated her sons as accessories for her public image. Carmen's video went viral in a matter of hours. Unlike Vivian's emotional and theatrical testimonies, Carmen spoke with the serenity of someone simply reporting facts observed over years. She showed the photos she had kept, read excerpts from the conversations she had witnessed, and most importantly, talked about how Arthur and Philip were happier and more spontaneous in the presence of genuinely caring caregivers. "I took care of these boys since they were born," Carmen said in the video, looking directly at the camera, "and I can guarantee that Richard Anderson is the best father they could have, even if he's not their biological father. He truly loves these children, not to get likes on social media." The reaction was immediate. Influencers with millions of followers began to publicly support Richard. Lawyers specializing in family law offered free help. Child psychologists wrote articles explaining the importance of true emotional bonds over biological ones. More importantly, mothers across America began to publicly question why an 8-year-old girl had managed to solve a problem that expensive doctors could not. "Perhaps," a famous pediatrician wrote on her blog, "it's time we listen more to children and less to protocols." It was in this climate of changing public opinion that Mr. Sanders called Richard on a Friday morning with the news he had been waiting for months. "Richard, I have news. Child Protective Services has decided to expedite the evaluation process of your application as a foster family." "Why? What changed?" Public pressure was important, but the decisive factor was something else. Dr. Helen Fields personally visited Hope and her siblings several times during these 3 months. And she was impressed with the girl's maturity and dedication. More than that, she noticed that Hope never asked about money, gifts, or material benefits. Every time the doctor asked about you, the girl only talked about Arthur and Philip, about how she was worried if they were still eating well. Richard. felt his heart race. What does this mean? It means that her psychological evaluation concluded that Hope has a genuine motivation and an exceptional capacity for emotional care for her age, and that you, by recognizing this, demonstrate good parental judgment. And what's the next step? The next step is a meeting on Monday, where a period of supervised cohabitation will be authorized. If all goes well, you can formalize the adoption in 3 months. Richard hung up the phone with tears in his eyes. He ran to Arthur and Philip's room, where they were melancholically playing with building blocks. "Boys, I have some news for you." The two looked up with cautious expectation. "On Monday, we'll be able to see Hope again." The transformation was instantaneous. Arthur and Philip jumped off the bed and ran to hug their father, shouting with joy. It was the first time in 3 months that Richard had seen that genuine sparkle in his son's eyes. "For real, Dad? We can play with her again?" Philip asked. "Yes, you can. And if everything goes well, she and her siblings will come to live with us forever." "Forever and ever?" Arthur questioned, still hesitant. "Forever." The Monday meeting took place in a cozy room at the Child Protective Services office, specifically decorated to welcome children. Hope arrived accompanied by Mrs. Rose, who had also been invited to the process. John and Mary came along, curious about the place where their sister would be spending some time. When Arthur and Philip entered the room and saw Hope, the race was inevitable. The three of them hugged as if they hadn't seen each other in years, chattering at the same time about everything that had happened during their separation. "Hope, we thought about you every day," Arthur exclaimed. "Me too. Every time I cooked, I wondered if you were eating well." "We always ate thinking of good things, just like you taught us," Philip said. "And did it work?" "It worked, but it worked better when we thought of you." Dr. Fields observed the children's interaction with a discreet smile. During the 3 months of investigation, she had seen many families trying to force emotional bonds for various interests. But there, in that room, she was witnessing something genuine and rare, unconditional love between children who had chosen to be a family. "Mr. Richard," she said, "I'd like to speak with you privately." In the hallway, away from the children, Dr. Fields was direct. "In 20 years of my career with Child Protective Services, I have rarely seen a situation as clear as this one." "Clear how?" "Clear in the sense that all motivations are genuine. Hope truly cares about the well-being of Arthur and Philip without any material interest. Your sons have truly developed a healthy emotional bond with her, and you truly demonstrate genuine gratitude, not just social guilt. And that means? It means I will recommend the immediate approval of the foster care process, with one condition." "What is it?" "That the transition be gradual. Hope and her siblings will spend weekends at your house for a month, then 3 days a week for another month, and only then the final move." "Of course. Whatever is best for them." "And there's another matter, Mrs. Rose." "What about Mrs. Rose?" "She was practically a mother to these children for 2 years. We can't simply ignore that bond." Richard nodded. "I've already thought about that. I'd like to offer her a job at my house, not as a nanny or a maid, but as part of the family. Will she accept?" "Let's ask her." When they returned to the room, they found all 5 children sitting in a circle on the floor, with Hope telling a story that included adventures of brave princesses, twin princes, and a wise grandmother. Mrs. Rose was knitting in a nearby chair, smiling as she listened to the narrative. "Mrs. Rose," Richard called, "may I speak with you?" She approached, a little apprehensive. "Would you like to come live with us too, as part of the family?" The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Richard, I would never abandon these children, but I don't want to be a burden in your house either." "A burden? Mrs. Rose, you would be a blessing, and you would be paid as a housekeeper, with all labor rights." "A housekeeper? Actually, it would be more like a grandmother, someone who takes care of all of us with love." Mrs. Rose looked at Hope, John, and Mary, then at Arthur and Philip. "If it's for the good of the children, I accept." The first weekend of cohabitation was magical. Hope, John, and Mary settled into the mansion as if they had always lived there. The rooms were rearranged so that all the children could be close. The perfect garden gained swings, and a vegetable patch where they planted herbs for the kitchen. Hope taught Arthur and Philip to cook simple but tasty dishes. John discovered a passion for books in Richard's library. Mary was enchanted by the pool and learned to swim in a matter of days. Mrs. Rose naturally assumed the role of the family matriarch, organizing routines so that all the children had time to study, play, and contribute to household chores. During the weeks that followed, Richard observed a complete transformation in the family dynamic. The house had become a true home full of laughter, conversations, and that special energy that only genuinely happy families can create. The legal adoption process was completed without any further obstacles. Vivian, whose public credibility had completely collapsed after Carmen's revelations, did not contest the decision. She retained the right to supervised visits with Arthur and Philip, but she rarely exercised this right, preferring to focus on rebuilding her own career on more honest terms. Thomas Mendoza, the twins' biological father, tried to make contact once, but Arthur and Philip were categorical. "Richard is our father. A father is who takes care of you, not who makes you." 6 months after the final move, Richard officially created the Hope's Cookies Institute, an organization that connected families willing to foster with children in situations of social vulnerability. Hope, despite her young age, became a sort of natural ambassador for the institute, visiting other children and teaching that caring with love is the best medicine in the world. The family's story gained national recognition when an independent documentary about emotional bonds included a segment about them. But this time, the exposure was different. It focused on the real transformation of people, not on sensationalism. Arthur and Philip developed extraordinarily. They became confident, generous, and deeply empathetic children. Their experience with emotional hunger had made them especially sensitive to the emotional needs of other children. John flourished academically, discovering a brilliant intelligence that his difficult life had masked. He dreamed of becoming a teacher to teach poor children that they can be smart too. Mary grew up surrounded by genuine love, developing a cheerful personality and a natural confidence that completely contrasted with her initial shyness. Mrs. Rose became the beating heart of the house, the one who kept everyone connected, fed, and loved. Her life wisdom perfectly complemented the formal education that Richard could offer, and Hope remained Hope, a caregiver, wise beyond her years, with a generous heart. But now she had the security and support needed to dream of her own future. She wanted to be a doctor, to take care of more children who are hungry in their hearts. A year after the official formation of the family, they celebrated the anniversary of the first time Hope had offered cookies to Arthur and Philip. The party was in the backyard, with no professional decorations or sophisticated menu. The cake was made by Hope, with the help of all her siblings, a simple carrot cake with chocolate frosting that became a family tradition. "Let's make a toast," Richard said, raising a glass of orange juice. "To what, Dad?" Arthur asked. "To the cookies that saved our family." Everyone laughed, remembering that distant day that had changed everything. "And to true love," Hope added. "Which doesn't cost money, but is worth more than anything," said Philip, repeating a phrase that had become a family mantra. "And to the family of the heart," said John. "Which is the best family of all," Mary finished. Mrs. Rose wiped away a tear. "And to the second chances life gives to those with a good heart." Richard looked around the table, seeing these 5 children and an old woman who had become his true wealth. He thought about how he had almost lost what mattered most by focusing on what mattered least. "And to the wisdom of an 8-year-old girl," he added, "who taught me that caring with love is truly the best medicine in the world." That night, after all the children were asleep, Richard sat on the porch looking at the stars. Mrs. Rose appeared with 2 cups of coffee and sat next to him. "Happy, my son?" she asked. "Complete," Richard replied. "For the first time in my life, I feel complete." Hope was right, wasn't she? Food tastes better when it's made with care and shared with love. She was right about a lot of things. That girl taught me more about fatherhood in one day than all the books I've read in years. And now? Now we'll continue to take care of each other. We'll continue to prove that family isn't about blood or money. It's about choosing to love every day. "And the cookies?" Richard smiled. "The cookies are still made every week, and every time one of the children is sad, we remember that the secret recipe isn't in the ingredients. It's in the care with which they are prepared. Just like life, isn't it? Just like life. 2 years later, the Anderson-Smith family had become a national reference in affective adoption. Hope, now 10, maintained her humility and wisdom, but had the security of someone who knew she was unconditionally loved. She studied at one of the best schools in New York, but never forgot where she came from or how she got there. Arthur and Philip became natural advocates for children in vulnerable situations, using their personal experience to help other boys and girls going through difficult times. John discovered a vocation for literature, writing short stories about brave children who overcame difficulties. Mary fell in love with music and was learning the piano, dreaming of playing for other sad children to make them smile again. The Hope's Cookies Institute had already facilitated the formation of dozens of successful foster families, always using as the main criterion not the financial capacity of the candidates, but their capacity to love genuinely. Richard had discovered that his true calling was not just to make money, but to transform lives. He maintained his businesses, but dedicated most of his time and resources to the Institute, and above all, to his chosen family. Vivian occasionally reappeared on social media, but with a completely different approach. She had sought therapy, acknowledged her mistakes, and was trying to rebuild a genuine relationship with Arthur and Philip. The process was slow and respectful, always prioritizing the well-being of the children. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, the entire family was gathered in the backyard. Hope was teaching Mary how to make cookies, while John read a book in the shade of a tree. Arthur and Philip were playing soccer with some neighbors who had become close friends. Mrs. Rose was knitting on the porch, watching everything with a serene smile. Richard was working on his laptop, but always keeping an eye on the children. It was a simple, everyday scene, with nothing extraordinary for an outsider to see. But for those who knew the story of that family, it was the perfect portrait of happiness achieved through true love. "Daddy," Hope called, approaching with flour on her hands, "want to try the new cookie we made?" "Of course, my daughter." Hope offered a small, round, simple cookie, made with basic ingredients, but prepared with all the love in the world. Richard tasted it and felt the same flavor as that first day. It wasn't just a cookie, it was love materialized in the form of food. "How is it?" she asked, anxious for his approval. "Perfect, as always." "It's because I made it thinking of all of you," Hope explained with her radiant smile. "I know, and that's why it always tastes delicious." Richard hugged the girl who had saved not only his sons from emotional hunger, but his entire family from the coldness of performative relationships. A girl who had proven that true wealth is not in the zeros in a bank account, but in sincere hugs, spontaneous laughter, stories told before bed, and the certainty that every person in the house is loved unconditionally, and that sometimes the salvation of an entire family can cost less than $10, but is worth more than all the treasures in the world.